It does not take a fancy degree in legal procedure or any fluency in legalese to understand what's at the core of today's developments, because all it is a simple question. Should Donald Trump be treated like the rest of us, or does his position as idol of the MAGA movement preclude him from something so silly as the law? You can guess the answer his lawyers are hoping for today, requesting a hearing in front of the full United States Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. Specifically, they are now asking the court to narrow or throw out the gag order imposed on Trump in the criminal case having to do with his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And they'd like a hold on the order while an appeal is considered. You'll remember trial judge Tanya Chutkan first imposed that restriction on Trump back in October, holding him to the same standards as any other criminal defendant, that he shouldn't publicly attack witnesses, specific prosecutors, or court staff members. 2 weeks ago, a three-judge panel upheld that basic idea, although it narrowed the order's scope, allowing Trump a bit more latitude, particularly to talk about the special prosecutor himself, Jack Smith. The judges found, quote, some aspects of Mr. Trump's public statements pose a significant and imminent threat to the fair and orderly adjudication of the ongoing criminal proceeding, end quote. And while they agreed that there was a, quote, strong public interest in Trump's public comments by virtue of his position, they said, quote, Mr. Trump is also an indicted criminal defendant, and he must stand trial in a courtroom under the same procedures that govern all other criminal defendants. That is what the rule of law means, end quote. This afternoon, we're also on standby waiting for another significant development, the as yet unreleased, unredacted version of the gag order ruling. Now, among the insights it's expected to provide, new detail on the full scope of the danger created by Trump's words and actions. Once we get that in our hands, you'll know about it immediately. But first, the central question. Will Trump be treated like any other criminal defendant in this country? It is in the hands of the U.S. Court of Appeals in D.C. for now. After all, if the full appeals court declines the request for a hearing, or even if they grant it and then subsequently rule against Trump, the very next stop is going to be the 9 justices on the Supreme Court of the United States. And that is where we start this hour with the former Assistant Director of Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, plus national investigative reporter for The Washington Post, Carol Leonnig, and former United States Attorney and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, Joyce Vance. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being with us. Joyce, let me start with you, because one could get the impression that these matters that we follow every afternoon in great detail are somewhat procedural in nature. And to some degree that's true, but you've written that it's actually substantially more important than that. The things that both Jack Smith and the Trump team are looking for will have deep and lasting influence on how these trials are conducted and what the outcomes could be.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, because what we're seeing now are the beginnings of shaping, for instance, the evidence that will be admitted at trial. But of course, how those cases will look when they go to trial and what sort of behavior the former president will be able to exhibit towards prosecutors and witnesses. So none of these decisions are being made by courts or by the parties in a vacuum. All of this is looking ahead in the D.C. case to that March trial date, trying to determine whether it will hold and how that trial will proceed when we get to it.
Frank Figliuzzi, the things that happen when Trump talks, there is absolutely, I think it's hard for those of us who are not lawyers to understand that there is a public interest in hearing what Trump has to say. We've used that argument after his rally this weekend, that he says some very, very unsavory things, particularly about immigrants. They're racist, and some of them invoke Hitler, but it's actually important for society to hear them. There is also a danger in what Trump says. I want to quote from the decision of the 3-judge panel for the U.S. Court of Appeals. This is the December 8 ruling that we're waiting for the unredacted version of. And they talk about the threat of Trump's words. It reads, before and after the district court's warning, Mr. Trump repeatedly used his public platform to denigrate and attack those involved in the criminal case against him. The day after his initial court appearance, Mr. Trump posted on his social media account, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. The day after Mr. Trump's "if you go after me, I'm coming after you" post, one of his supporters called the district court's judge's chambers and said, "Hey, you stupid slave N-word. If Trump doesn't get elected in 2024, we are coming to kill you. So tread lightly, B-word. You will be targeted personally, publicly, your family, all of it." You know from your work at the FBI that influential people who say things can have real effects.
Indeed. Now, the documentation is there. The data is there. No one can, with a straight face, any longer claim that there's no way for Trump to predict how people are going to behave based on his rhetoric. We have case after case after case, many of them violent, some of them fatal, all stemming from his rhetoric and the rhetoric of those around him. So how is that going to play out in these court proceedings? First, I expect that when we get this, the gag order or the government's response to the gag order or application for it, and it's unredacted, we're probably going to see more cases than we even know about, Ali. We'll probably see cases involving the FBI and other agencies where people have acted out or threatened courthouse personnel or staff or prosecutors or the judge. So stand by for that. And then also this whole concept of what lawyers claim or call prior restraint, the idea that someone is going to tell you what you can't say or can say before you say it. Courts take this very seriously, restraining someone's speech. And certainly if someone's running for president and is leading his party as a presidential candidate, they're going to take it very carefully. But I think they're walking a nice line here already. They're saying, look, we're going to say that you don't have to make an imminent threat. You don't have to say that at 2 p.m. this afternoon, I think everyone should go to Jack Smith's house and hurt him. We're not going to wait for that to happen anymore. We're going to say that you can't do this because we think it's going to lead to this. And so I think they're allowing him to speak. He's free to attack DOJ, the Biden administration. He can talk about the prosecutor and call him whatever he calls Jack Smith these days, deranged. He can do that, but he can't mess and threaten with the judicial process, the court process, the rule of law. And I think they're doing a fine job with that. And I think that's what we're going to hear the entire appellate court say about this.
Carol, many of these things have to do with delaying the trial because while most people charged with something would like to take advantage of their constitutional protections to have a speedy trial, Donald Trump has a unique interest in none of these trials being speedy, which is why Jack Smith has gone right to the Supreme Court in the case of the immunity question to say, please, this is going to end up with you guys, so please deal with it anyway. But when Donald Trump talks about the things that his lawyers want him to be able to do with these gag orders, whether it's in the federal case or whether it's in the New York civil case, it seems like something else is happening. It seems like Donald Trump is saying, notwithstanding the jeopardy I face in the legal system, I have an entirely different audience out there that's going to come out and support me and believe that this is all fake prosecution and a witch hunt.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Ali, because usually the default position with Donald Trump, whether as a president, a presidential candidate, or a businessman, the default belief is that every time he appeals something, no matter how flimsy or thin the legal argument that he presents or his lawyers present, the goal is presumed to be delay, 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 delay. Let's see if people get tired. Let's see if people give up. Let's see in the case of the immunity case, the immunity pleadings, if basically this trial doesn't happen until the election, after the election, when presumably Donald Trump thinks he's going to win, and therefore this will be kind of a get out of jail card if he were threatened with conviction and ultimately sentencing. However, you're so right to bring up the issue of the gag order because there is something else going on here. According to our reporting and according to conversations with sources, Donald Trump is really feeling his oats about how he's able to communicate to his supporters that he's persecuted, that bad people, people he will misdescribe as having evil, nefarious motives rather than being public servants working in the criminal justice system, that these folks need to be called out as his enemies, his arch enemies, and the people who are trying to block the voters from getting what they want, which is a second term of Donald Trump in the Oval Office. That persecution narrative is essential to Donald Trump's poll numbers in many respects. People really respond when he says, and this has been proven repeatedly over the last, I would say, 12 months since he announced his candidacy, people really respond when he says, they're trying to go after me because they're trying to hurt you, my supporters. That really is a charm, if you will, for him in his quest for re-election.